Previously on Catastrophic Failure. Prestige limousine and chauffeur service operator Nauman Hussain pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide in the deaths of all 20 people who were killed in the limo crash. He avoided any prison time in a deal made with the Schoharie County District Attorney.
Nothing about it felt right at all. It felt disgusting.
The plea deal left Times Union reporter Larry Rulison feeling uneasy. And it left the families of the limo victims devastated. To them, probation and community service alone did not feel like justice. It also raised questions among the general public. Why did Nauman Hussain not get any prison time? He pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide, which carries a sentence of 1 1/3 to 4 years in New York State, and he pleaded guilty to 20 counts of it. The fact that his father was a known FBI informant stood out. Was the FBI somehow involved in this? Were they protecting Nauman Hussain somehow? Were they protecting his father? Were they working behind the scenes to keep Nauman out of prison or to scrub any of the Hussain family's transgressions leading up to the crash?
I am requesting your commitment today to turn over all the FBI's documents, including the source file related to Mr. Hussain, his family, his companies, and any involvement in the investigation.
In 2022, the FBI promised New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik that they would launch an internal investigation into their handling of the informant, Shahed Hussain, and whether anything they may have done could be tied to the crash. We have talked a lot about the man known as Shahed Hussain in this podcast. But in 6 years of reporting this story, we had never heard directly from him.
He's just this shadowy figure. I mean, it's almost like out of a comic somewhere or something, just he's like a mythical character. No one's ever, at least since he left, been able to talk to him in person.
Shahed Hussain has never been charged with any crimes in relation to the limo crash. But his connection to one of the deadliest ground transportation disasters of its kind on record made him an essential part of this story. So we couldn't not talk about him in our reporting. It's our responsibility as journalists, though, to do what we can to ask him for comment. If he's not going to respond to us, we can't really do anything about it. Larry Rulison reached out every way that he could think of. He even went so far as to price out plane tickets to Pakistan to try to find him, which would be a task that would be akin to looking for a needle in a haystack. But Shahed Hussain never responded to any requests for comment. And that's how things stood for almost 6 years. But as we were putting this very episode together, Larry Rulison made a phone call that changed everything.
Oh, hi. Is this Malik?
Yes, Larry. How are you, sir?
I'm Jessica Marshall. This is Catastrophic Failure, Episode 7, The Informant. If you've been with us thus far, You know that the narrative and the details may be upsetting or disturbing at times, so please listen with care. 5 years after the crash, Larry and I went to visit Nauman Hussein's defense attorney, Lee Kindlon, in his downtown Albany office. Kindlon says he never gave much credence to questions about the FBI's involvement in protecting the Hussains before or after the limo crash.
I never saw any indication that the FBI or some agent or some guy who became, an elected official and sort of, I never saw any indication that somehow there's a thumb on the scale or some sort of order from the FBI to ignore this or that. I didn't see it. And then I thought, well, even if I did see it, does it matter?
Nauman's defense was focused on the evidence that Mavis Discount Tire had faked brake work that Nauman paid for months before the crash in 2018. The FBI allegations had nothing to do with that, Kindlon argues.
I think that is just people searching for, something that doesn't exist.
It took a year for the FBI to complete its promised investigation into their handling of Shahed Hussain as an informant. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik said she got an email just before a House Intelligence Committee hearing in March of 2023, letting her know that the agency had finally agreed to give her a briefing. It would be closed door, of course, with things redacted. During the hearing, she asked FBI Director Christopher Wray for one more thing.
Can you commit to providing that briefing to those family members, immediate family members, the parents or spouses of those victims?
On that one, let me make sure I talk with our folks and circle back with you about what can be shared if there are any limitations. Obviously, we want to make sure that the victims and their families are appropriately informed, but I don't know yet what constraints there may be, so we will follow back up with you on that.
Yeah, they have not been appropriately informed, and it's only because of my work in congressional oversight that they're starting to have sunlight. I believe you're a parent, Chris Wray?
Yes, I'm a parent.
I'm a new parent as well, and there is a set of parents that lost 3 daughters in that crash, so providing sunlight and transparency is important.
Stefanik got the number of daughters wrong. The family she's referring to, the King family, lost 4 daughters, not 3. But she got what she wanted, what the families wanted. The FBI was finally going to talk about Shahed Hussain, and whether anything they may have done to shield his family's misdeeds could be tied to the limo crash.
I said, okay, just leave it as it is and just put it away.
So this was covered with plaster?
Yeah, it was plaster. Yeah. And then I put it like that.
70-year-old Mohammed Hussain is proud of the work that he has done on a rental home that he owns in Albany, New York. The refinished wood floors gleam and contrast nicely with a trendy exposed brick accent wall. Like that old Albany architecture.
Yeah, that's what my intention was.
Yeah. Many houses in this Albany neighborhood are outright condemned, a consequence of years of redlining that choked the life out of it. But Hussein's house is a bright spot. He's been working for months, largely on his own, to get his 2-family house ready for potential tenants.
On the way you can look at it, it's beautiful looking. But whatever it was.
Hussain is quiet, but not shy. His hair and closely shaven beard are mostly white. Yet his eyes have a youthful sparkle. He was born in Bangladesh. He came to the United States aboard a cargo ship 40 years ago. He's now a naturalized U.S. citizen. He's been dealing with some serious health issues lately. He had surgery at Albany Med a few weeks before Larry and I met him at his house one morning in late August of 2023. But his health doesn't seem to keep him down. He has big plans for the future. We sat down at the kitchen table in the brightly lit upper floor apartment that he was getting ready to rent out.
I don't know how shall I say. People perhaps would not accept this if I say God speaks to me. But He does. He did ever since I was a Rensselaer County jail.
Hussain is very vocal about his faith. He admits he wasn't always the best Muslim, but he says his connection to God really blossomed during the decade and a half that he spent in prison. Let's go back in time for a moment to 2004.
Last night, FBI agents in Albany, New York, arrested 2 men on the basis of warrants issued on a criminal complaint filed in federal court in Albany.
That's then Deputy Attorney General James Comey at a press conference in Washington. He was there to announce that 2 men suspected of terrorism were arrested.
Those men have been identified as 34-year-old Yassin Muhyiddin Aref and 49-year-old Mohammed Musharraf Hussain.
And then all of a sudden, government decided, my beloved government, I rather say, United States of America, which I dearly love, and they targeted me for dirty reason.
Hussain was convicted 2 years later of money laundering and conspiracy to commit terrorism. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He got out in 2020 and served 3 years probation. He now lives in Albany with his wife, but the past still haunts him. Hussain has maintained his innocence for 20 years. 20 years, he says, that he could have spent with his family, watching his children grow up, living and working in the Albany community he calls home. A life he could have lived, he says, if he had never crossed paths with Shahed Hussain. Mohammed and Shahed are not related. Their surnames are spelled differently. They're pronounced differently. Mohammed is Bangladeshi, Shahed is Pakistani. They don't share any blood, familial connection, or ethnicity. Yet, they are inextricably tied to each other.
Malik is dirty. He's like a con man.
The Malik he's referring to is actually Shahed. He went by that name when Mohammed first met him in the summer of 2003. Shahed walked into the Albany pizza shop Mohammed owned one July afternoon. He introduced himself as a wealthy Pakistani businessman named Malik. The FBI says the pair became fast friends. Horoya Hussain was in elementary school when the man named Malik came into their lives. He would often hang out at the pizza shop with his dad. He says what Mohammed and Malik had, it wasn't a friendship.
He would, try to come and, try to win us over by giving us gifts and those type of things. Like, when my dad was there, he'd try to go on these deliveries with my dad and try to get recordings. And we're finding that out all after the fact. But in the moment, my dad's like, why is this guy annoying me?
At the time, Mohammed says he was really struggling to make ends meet. So when Malik offered to loan him $5,000, he went for it. Mohammed brought in the spiritual leader of his mosque in Albany, a Kurdish refugee named Yassin Aref, to witness the loan transaction. A witness is customary for this in Islamic tradition. What Mohammed didn't realize, though, was that Malik's loan proposal was a setup. In the wake of 9/11, the Bush administration was laser-focused on counterterrorism. The war on terror was in full force. This was an FBI sting designed to catch terrorists living in the U.S. The FBI had identified Yassin Aref as a potential target. They believed he had past associations with individuals that were affiliated with terrorist groups. They saw Mohammed Hussain as a way to catch Aref, and Malik, aka Shahed Hussain, was the star of the sting that would ultimately bring both of them down. He was the informant, or as the FBI referred to him, the cooperating witness.
The cooperating witness brought a shoulder-fired missile to a meeting with Mr. Hussain and explained that he imports such things and ships them to New York City to the Mujahid brothers, the implying terrorist operatives, to shoot down airplanes.
One of the key pieces of evidence brought at trial was a video recording that showed Malik taking out a fake shoulder-fired missile in front of Mohammed Hussain. According to the sting, Malik was to make it clear that the money he would loan Mohammed came from the sale of that missile to a terrorist organization that was plotting to kill the Pakistani ambassador in New York.
The cooperating witness, the plan they conceived would give Hussain cash, who would then run that money through his businesses in Albany and repay the cooperating witness using business checks.
Mohammed Hussain and Yassin Aref stood trial together in 2006. In a true moment of irony in this story, perhaps, Yassin Aref's lawyer was Terry Kindlin. Terry Kindlin is the father of Nauman Hussain's defense attorney, Lee Kindlin. Albany is kind of a small town when it comes to the legal community. The guilty verdict in the Hussain Aref trial was highly controversial. Many felt the pair had been entrapped. They asked, would either of these men have ever committed a punishable offense if they hadn't been caught in a sting?
They love sting operations because they can control every aspect of the case and they're not really in any danger, and they can control the sentencing. So they love it. It's like a conviction in a box for them.
Kathy Manley is a criminal defense attorney in upstate New York. She represents Yassin Aref. She's also one of the founding members of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, an organization dedicated to, quote, ending the abuses of the U.S. domestic war on terror.
Usually what they do is they pick targets who maybe were upset about U.S. foreign policy, who are actually Muslim and maybe are from a country that's being bombed and is upset about that and wants to do something, and they kind of give them an idea of what to do about it. And I think that's still entrapment and it's still wrong. And a lot of times those people have mental illness or they have some vulnerability that makes them agree to this stuff.
Mohammed Hussain's vulnerability, she says, was money. He was desperate to make ends meet, to keep his businesses and family afloat. And Shahed Hussain's skill at manipulation sealed the deal.
He wasn't really very charming, but he was good at lying.
Retired Special Agent Tim Cole was in charge of the anti-terrorism unit in the FBI's Albany office at the time. He says it was a textbook operation.
They were both convicted after a very public trial, and their appeals were strongly affirmed by the Second Circuit. And I feel strongly that America is safer because of it.
We'll be right back.
Why is healthcare so expensive? What's happening with climate change? And are elections safe? You can find answers to those questions and a lot more with Capitol Confidential from me, Dan Clark. I give you the latest news and analysis from the state capitol and beyond. Sign up now at CapitolConfidential.com. That's Capital with an O, confidential.com.
This is catastrophic failure. Shahed Hussain's work for the FBI resulted in 7 convictions that we know of. When we reached out to Tim Cole in August of 2023, he was running for Public Safety Commissioner in Saratoga Springs. He was getting a lot of heat for that FBI sting nearly 20 years prior from his opponent. We found him willing to talk a little more about his interaction with Shahed Hussain. Larry and I met Cole at his house in Saratoga Springs. We sat down at his dining room table with the understanding, of course, that there were certain things that were not up for discussion.
Is there anything else that you can tell us about Malik in terms of, like, I don't know, his personality? Because I know in one of the depositions you did say something to the effect of he was deceptive. I don't remember exactly what you said.
I can remember, so I get cross-examined for 8 hours by Kevin or Terry, and they say, well, was Malik good at his job of being deceptive? And so the answer is yes or no. If it was no, he wouldn't be an FBI informant, right? If he was not a good informant, he would not be an FBI informant, right? So the answer is yes. If I told him, I give him an instruction, like I would do for an undercover, and say, you go meet with the subject, and it's a ruse, you believe, present it to him that you're, a radical extremist or a member of Al-Qaeda, he would do that, and he could do that. So that's the answer to that question is yes, he was a good informant. Yeah. And I've operated many good informants, over the years.
Yeah, this wasn't just your one.
No, yeah. I mean, I've operated dozens and dozens of informants, and I will say, informants in general are not people of stellar character, right? Some of them are. Some of them want to be informants because they want to do what's right for America. They want to do what's right for their country, but most of them aren't. And those people that are of good character don't have the access that folks that may be involved in criminal activity have. So there's a balance. But the bottom line is, if you're an FBI agent, you need to be able to operate an informant in accordance with the Attorney General guidelines, or you'll be out of business and you'll be terminated.
What was he like? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so, obviously the FBI has spent a lot of money training me on how to operate and develop informants and operating them in accordance with the Attorney General guidelines. I, in turn, have trained new agents to do that as well. The relationship between an agent and a source should be transactional, right? And that's how my relationship was with him. It was transactional. I met Malik in 2002. The FBI arrested him. And he subsequently pled guilty to a charge. It was fraud and related identification documents. I'm not going to speak any further about it because that's what's in the public record if you look in PACER. So he has a history of being a criminal, being a felon. So when I operated him in this, what I've always done is every single time Malik met with the subject of investigation, the conversation was tape recorded. So that takes away some strategy involved. It takes away any defense argument about Malik's character, because there's an old saying in the government, you can't cross-examine a tape.
And is there anything that you can say about why he was no longer an informant?
I don't know if that's public. I don't know if that's public, but I'll just say in general, we close informants for a few reasons. We close them because they're not productive. I don't think that's any secret. Or you can't access them for some reason, but that would fall under not being productive. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to go into anything further.
As I said before, when we started this podcast, we had never been able to speak directly to Shahed Hussain. But that changed literally a few days ago. Shahed sent Larry Rulison an email in late August. We were not able to verify that it was really him, though, until early September of 2024, when Larry Rulison dialed what we believed was Shahed's number. And Shahed picked up.
I was trying to reach you a lot of times, and maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places.
I know you were reaching me. Everybody was telling me you were reaching me.
The combination of the connection and his heavy accent makes it a little hard to hear what he's saying. His voice was quiet, and his words were often punctuated by coughing and wheezing. He says he's under constant medical care, suffering from cardiovascular disease. That's the reason he says he left the United States for Pakistan in 2018, before the limo crash. He said now he travels between Pakistan and Abu Dhabi, where he receives medical care at the Cleveland Clinic there.
I cannot talk about FBI or my work with the FBI or anything like that. So, if I mean it, so that's the thing that I did. I just don't want to talk about the FBI. So.
You'll hear more from our interview with Shahed Hussain in upcoming episodes. He reached out to talk now because, he says, he felt that he and his son Nauman were being unfairly targeted as the only ones to blame for the limo crash. Shahed may not want to talk about his past today, but he was a big talker about it in the past.
When he became an FBI informant and he would testify at these court cases, a lot of times the defense in those terrorism cases would they'd ask him about his background and family background, and he would always testify that he came from a very wealthy family in Pakistan, and that the family was in the restaurant business and also the construction business, and that they knew a lot of powerful people.
He claimed to be close personal friends with former Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Shahed also claimed to be the brother of Pakistani billionaire Malik Riaz. The latter claim is actually true, according to Malik Riaz himself. He confirmed it in a deposition to the lawyers of the limo families. Anyway, here's what else we know about Shahed Hussain from his own lips in court testimony against men that he lured into FBI stings. He says he was arrested for murder in 1994 and tortured in a Pakistani jail. The murder thing was a sham, he claimed, cooked up by political enemies trying to take down his high-powered family. He says his father bribed a local police chief to get him out of jail, and then he used a fake British passport to flee the country. He took his wife and 2 young sons, one of whom was Nauman, with him. He says they crossed the U.S. border in El Paso, they claimed asylum, and ended up in Albany, New York. Larry Rulison poured through hundreds of pages of court transcripts to tease out a timeline.
When he came to the United States in the early 90s, seeking political asylum from Pakistan, the first thing he did was get a job at a gas station.
He made $4 an hour. Then he worked his way up to leasing his own gas station and convenience store, and he moved his family to Loudonville, a wealthy suburb of Albany, in 1998. He purchased a $90,000 home. From there, he seems to have leveraged his skills as a polyglot. He spoke Urdu, English, and Dutch, among other languages, he claimed, and got a job as a translator for a contractor working with the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. But he was caught bribing a DMV official to create fake driver's licenses for immigrants in 2001. He faced deportation. At that time, though, the FBI really needed help with the war on terror. So they offered Shahed a deal. Be an informant for us, and we'll let this go. He accepted. His first assignment was to rat out fellow conspirators in the driver's license scam. He graduated to anti-terrorism operations. After a few years, the FBI started paying him for his efforts. Larry couldn't calculate the exact amount, but based on court documents he reviewed, he believes it may have been a 6-figure sum. In the summer of 2003, Hussain filed for bankruptcy. 2 months later, his house burned down. The FBI showed up as the local firefighters put out the blaze.
The house burned down. His wife ended up having to jump out a window. I think she got really hurt. So the FBI was really panicked at the time that someone was out to kill Shahed. I don't know if they were worried it was a witness or someone or one of the people he was previously associated with back in Pakistan, where he got allegedly got in a lot of trouble with the law. But there was also rumors that maybe it was arson too. No, we never know. I never got the local fire department to explain what the final findings were on that fire.
According to the files from the bankruptcy case, Shahed Hussain received an insurance payout on the house, even though he did not have homeowners insurance. The family netted $83,000 from an insurance policy that had been taken out on the home by the bank that held the mortgage.
For some reason, the bankruptcy court allowed him to collect this insurance payout from his home being destroyed. It was very bizarre.
The FBI moved Shahed and his family to Tennessee for a time after that. The family returned to the Albany area, though, and Hussain sold the charred remains of his property for $450,000 in 2006. That was more than 3 times the market value at the time.
Our investigation just couldn't figure out how he sold the house for that much. We couldn't even find the buyer of the house. We couldn't find this person to find out if they even existed. And so there were all these mysteries.
Larry asked Shahed Hussain about this over the phone.
What is your connection to the man who purchased your Loudonville home?
Now you're going personally in my life, so I won't go personally. I would stay with you on the crash. Nothing personal or my work.
However, Hussain said in court more than a decade ago that he used the profits from the house and the insurance payout to purchase a rundown motel near Saratoga Springs in the summer of 2006. He paid $650,000, and he called it the Crest Inn Suites and Cottages. Hussain also claimed in court that he spent time during these years traveling across the world, doing work for the FBI. He claimed to be in London, Pakistan, and Dubai. He claimed to have infiltrated a terrorist camp on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. The FBI, of course, won't confirm or deny any of this. And neither will Shahed. But for all the work he may have been doing for the FBI, he left quite a trail of apparent misdeeds back in upstate New York.
Yeah, I mean, there was lawsuits. There was accusations. There was, the police were called, the sheriff's department were called. There was records. I mean, he was charged with, sending bad checks to people. These are things where the authorities are involved, and he's got, there's a police record.
Yet all those cases somehow resolved. The $64,000 question, did the FBI know about all this? Here's retired FBI agent Tim Cole again.
Was you even aware of, Malik's business activities when you were supervising him? Do you ever know that kind of detail?
The answer to that question is yes. We do know some of that detail, but I cannot elaborate because we're going to get into methods performed by the FBI, and that would be improper to do that.
Sure.
But the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah. She's never, I don't think to date he's really been charged with anything. Everything from his files and everything, it always seemed to get expunged or taken care of before it ever got, terribly bad. And this is all why he worked with the FBI. So that's why people always assumed that the FBI was either making sure he didn't get caught or help maybe other law enforcement agencies helped out just to make sure that he kind of skated through the criminal system, but he never was charged. I don't think he ever spent a day in prison or jail even when the FBI arrested him.
In 2009, 4 men were arrested outside a synagogue in the Bronx. According to the FBI, they'd been caught in the act of planting what those men believed to be bombs on the property. Bombs that were intended to blow up the synagogue and its congregants. But the bombs were fake, supplied by, you guessed it, Malik. Shahed Hussain was once again masquerading as a wealthy Pakistani businessman on behalf of the FBI. But this time, Malik launched the operation outside a mosque in Newburgh, New York. That's about 60 miles north of New York City and an hour and a half south of Albany. Agent Tim Cole says he was not involved in that sting. Malik had convinced a man he met in the mosque's parking lot, James Cromedy, to take part in a fake scheme to blow up the Bronx synagogue and fire missiles at nearby Stewart International Airport. He promised Cromedy $250,000, and Cromedy recruited 3 other local men to help. They all became known as the Newburgh Four. The Newburgh Four were convicted in 2011 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Once again, Shahed Hussain was the FBI's star witness. By this time, defense attorneys were very familiar with Hussein's record as an informant, thanks in large part to the Shahed Hussain case. The judge ordered federal prosecutors to turn over 400 pages of government files on Shahed Hussain, including his tax returns, immigration file, FBI records, and letters from his banks. Then, the defense attorneys for the Newburgh Four laid into him on the stand. They wanted to destroy his credibility as an informant. They painted him as a con man who regularly committed perjury, also widespread tax fraud and money laundering with his motel business. The defense attorney for Newburgh Four defendant Anta Williams focused on letters Hussain had received from upstate New York bank officers. He'd received a number of large wire transfers over the years for the motel. They totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars from shadowy accounts in Pakistan, London, and Dubai. The Newburgh Four, James Cromedy, Anta Williams, David Williams, and Laguerre Payen, were all granted compassionate release in 2023 and 2024, after more than a decade each in prison. A federal judge slammed the FBI in her order. She said the agency had crossed the line, that the Newburgh Four were essentially entrapped. She said the FBI sent a, quote, villain, referring to Shahed Hussain, to troll among the poorest and weakest of men for terrorists, who might prove susceptible to an offer of much-needed cash in exchange for committing a faux crime, unquote. Shahed Hussain started Prestige Limousine in 2012. He said in court that he funded it with money that he got from wealthy family members in Pakistan. But was that really true? The limo families were trying to find out through lawsuits against him and his brother, Pakistani real estate mogul Malik Riaz. Malik Riaz said under oath that he gave his brother money twice since 2010. The first was that year. He says he lent him $250,000 to save the Crest Inn suites and cottages from going under. And Shahed put his brother's name on the deed. He says he also gave Shahed $60,000 in March of 2018. That was money, he said, to buy a car when Shahed first got back to Pakistan. But Malik Riaz swore under oath that he knew nothing about Prestige Limousine. He says he's not close with his brother and has neither seen nor spoken to him since the crash. He told the attorneys he was angry with his brother over the situation. In the end, the limo family's attorneys could not link Malik Riaz to the limo business, and he was dismissed from their lawsuits in 2022. We don't know much about what Shahed Hussain was doing in Pakistan or wherever he was after he left the United States in 2018. The search for him kept Larry working late, day after day, sometimes into the wee hours of the morning for years. But one night, while in recovery from stage 4 cancer and isolated due to COVID, Larry found a clue while he was poking around on Facebook.
Yeah, so I knew that he was from the city of Lahore, Pakistan. So honestly, one night I just started searching photos of Lahore, Pakistan. I looked through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos, and then I came upon one with him.
Yeah, you heard that right. Larry spent hours poring over thousands of photos taken in a city of 12 million people. And he found one. Talk about a needle in a haystack. And then he found video. Shahed was on camera in a YouTube video claiming to be the CEO of a real estate company starting a multi-million-dollar residential golf resort in Pakistan.
एक्चुअली गॉफ रेजिडेंशिया एक प्रोजेक्ट नहीं एक शहर है अब जब मेगा सिटी बनना है इसमें
At one point, I remember he claimed that Tiger Woods' golf design company was helping him with the project, which I called the company up and I said, did you get hired by this Pakistan businessman, Shahed Hussain? And, they said, no, we never even heard of the guy.
They should punish him, throw him in jail after deported him, but they did not. And then look at how many family he been destroyed.
As you probably can tell, Mohammed Hussain does not have a very high opinion of Shahed Hussain, and neither does his son, Haroya.
I don't think there's a straight bone in that guy's body. When you look at anything that he did, anything that he touched, he's always trying to bend it into something that benefits him. And even he's tried to manipulate the FBI, and that's their game. So I don't know how it pertains to us specifically, but we're just bystanders. We're just getting swished by the storm, and and now my dad, he's putting pieces back together, like he said. And
Mohammed Hussain and his family know that Shahed was the owner of the limo company involved in the crash that killed 20 people in 2018. He says they pray for the victims and their families. Lawyer Kathy Manley summed up their feelings too.
We always knew something like this might happen because, we had no idea but that this, of course, would happen, but we knew that everything he touched was destroyed in some way or corroded in some way or corrupted in some way. And this is getting emotional about it now, but when we heard about this, it was just like, wow, how could the FBI let this guy keep doing all this stuff and let this happen?
Shahed Hussain wouldn't tell us exactly where he was on the phone. He said he split his time between Pakistan and Abu Dhabi, where he was receiving medical treatments at the Cleveland Clinic. He also says he's been unfairly treated by the media for the last 20 years.
I think for the whole week you have been broadcasting story about me, about the limo crash. So, I do look at the newspaper, so the news travels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I think your stories should be based on facts and facts only, and it should not be on hearsay. And that's all your stories are, is hearsay. I want you to please write the truth. We are not bad people. We are not.
The FBI finally shared the report on its internal investigation into the handling of the informant Shahed Hussain in 2023. Larry Rulison never actually got to see the report, but he spoke to a number of sources who had seen it firsthand.
The basic, gist of the report, which was like an internal report to make sure that no, internal regulations were broken. It was like a internal report about, FBI affairs. It wasn't ever intended to be public, really. It basically said that there was no involvement with the FBI in the crash, and that Shahed had actually been kicked out of the FBI as an informant sometime in like July 2018, way before the crash, and so the FBI basically washed their hands of it.
So the bottom line is the FBI says they stopped working with Shahed Hussain a few months before the crash, and they had nothing to do with anything that caused it. But there was one thing in that report that caught our eye. The day of the crash, Nauman Hussain made a phone call to Tim Cole, his father's former FBI handler.
So what happened the day of the crash, he called me, and I've never spoken to him on the phone before. I met him once or twice years before in relation to his father. And he said to me, "This is Nauman," and he might have used his nickname. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, Sean or
a nickname. Names, so. He said, "I'm Malik's son," and he said, "I said yes." And I picked up the phone. I didn't even know who was calling me. I picked it up, and I can remember it like yesterday. It was a very, it was a beautiful day. Mm-hmm. So he said, "I'm Malik's son. My driver." He goes, "I run a limousine company, and my driver just had a crash." And he said, "He's a very good driver, and someone died." I said, "Okay." And he said, "The state police want to ask me questions." And I said, "Well, you go tell the state police the truth." That's exactly what I told him. My sense of it is that he probably got my number from his father, and he was scared and panicked, and that's why he called me.
The limo families got briefings with the FBI as well. Kevin Cushing, whose son Patrick died in the crash, met with the FBI twice.
They were reading from a script. And so that wasn't very satisfying. And I wasn't given a chance to push back. And the families had one over the phone as well. And we pushed back a little bit, but the person that basically briefed us said, "I really can't speak about that because I don't know."
Janet Steenberg, who lost her sons Axel and Rich, says she also came away unsatisfied.
I'm thinking to myself, how do we, these small families from Amsterdam, Gloversville, Mayfield, how do we get mixed in with the FBI, the state police, terrorism, and all that? How did we get into all that? We just send our kids, they just run out to go to a birthday party.
We may never get to know more information about the exact nature of the FBI's relationship with Shahed Hussain. But even if it had come to light that the FBI had a hand in shielding the Hussain family from misdeeds that led to the limo crash, it still would not have been the only place to lay blame for it. As we've learned through our reporting, the crash was caused by multiple factors that came together in a catastrophic way. A catastrophic failure.
Again, I think people want to bring order to all this chaos, and they want to explain how this all happened, and it's not there.
Lee Kinlan was talking here about the FBI theory and some conspiracy theories about what led to the crash that came up in the 5 years since it happened. And he's not wrong. So much about this horrific incident still feels senseless, even when you have something or someone to blame for it. Next time on Catastrophic Failure, Nauman Hussain returns to court for his formal sentencing a year after he agreed to a deal that would spare him prison time. He had been expecting to get a sentence of probation and community service.
And I've been practicing in front of Judge Lynch for a decade. I could see a glint in his eye as people are talking. And just something in the lizard part of my brain said, hey, Lee, something's about to happen.
Every single one of us as parents just looked at each other like, oh my God, can he do that?
What happened next sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. Catastrophic Failure is a production of the Times Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall. Original reporting by Larry Rulison. Editorial direction and fact-checking by Erica Smith and Casey Seiler. Special thanks to Brendan Lyons. Our theme music is Undercurrent by Harper Ray. If you have any questions or comments about anything in this podcast, or you're a player in the story who wants to talk to us for it, please email us at podcast@timesunion.com. That's podcast@timesunion.com.